Good afternoon and welcome to the Way to Wow, People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're here every week, Wednesdays, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, and as I say, an hour in for Central and Mountain. And you're probably wondering what's with the Navy flight suit. So yeah, I'm not in my normal collar shirt and vest. So today was career day at my daughter's school. She goes to high school, and so they asked me if I would come and talk about lie about what it's like to be in the Navy. And so I did, and actually it was great. I was part of a group that had two young petty officers and a Marine Corps staff sergeant. And then we had an EMT firefighter and a police detective with us. So we got to talk about what it's like to have a job where you, shall we say, overtly serve your community. Because as I've talked about before on this show, while I think it's noble what first responders and people in the military do, I think there's lots of ways to serve our community, serve our fellow citizens, as you will. And my guest today is an absolute prime example of that. And it's why I'm so excited to have Norm Mitchell on with me. He's got some of his colleagues on the meeting here as well. So Norm Mitchell, welcome to the Way to Wow show. How are you?
Hey, thanks, Kevin. I am fantastic, sir. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
That's good. And look, I can see you're a Cowboys fan, right? America's team, isn't that what they say?
That's exactly right. Every classy person is a Cowboys fan.
So I will tell you, when I was a young lad living in Dallas, Texas, my dad was a big time Cowboys fan. And one of his greatest joys was to have his son sit and watch football with him. And it's where I learned to dislike beer, because as a kid of, I think I was 7 or 8, he said, "Here, try some of this beer." And I'm like, "Oh, this is foul," which I think was the aim of the exercise. But the beer never reflected on the Cowboys. This was during the days of Tom Landry and Roger Staubach and those great teams back then. So I have fond memories of the Cowboys, watching them with my dad. So
Nice.
so let's get right into this. So I've known Norm for I think about a year now. Norm is an Army veteran and who transitioned in the financial services industry. And we're gonna, as we do, talk about I'm calling him Ron. What am I talking about? Norm. Norm was in the Army and then got into financial services, and we're gonna sort of trace Norm's professional arc and see what lessons there are for us that we can learn. So Norm, let's start. As far back as you'll go. In what was your motivation for joining the Army? And when did you join the Army? Was it out of high school, or what was that all about?
That's actually a kind of a funny story in a way. I was one of those guys that, it was going to be like join the Army or go to jail kind of thing, right? But I grew up in a very small town. It's called Marble Falls. It's about an hour outside of Austin, Texas, kind of in Central Texas. After high school, I went to junior college and studied radio and television broadcasting. Did some work in radio. I was a disc jockey at a couple of different stations, and got a job as a nightclub assistant manager, one of the more popular clubs in our area. And all of a sudden kind of started hanging out with the wrong crowd, doing the wrong things. This is back in the early 80s when a lot of people did the wrong things, kind of like in the 60s. And it's a tragedy, but on New Year's Eve of 1984, going into 1985, in the club, on the dance floor, one of my very, very, very best friends died in my arms of a cocaine overdose. And so that kind of was one of those, oh my goodness, moments. And it really was a blessing in disguise, not for him, obviously, but it woke me up. And less than 90 days later, I was at basic training. I was kind of a dream come true for a recruiter, because I just walked in and said, what do you got with a bonus? And after a couple of things, I picked one and off I went. And had no intention of staying in the Army for very long, but I kind of excelled, did really well. Made E7 in 11 years. I traveled the world. I was part of Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I went to Korea, Germany. Just had a great time. And then in 1998, I went to Korea, and honestly, that was kind of the last straw of a 16-year marriage that didn't make it to 17. And I came back, and when I came back in 1999, got stationed back at Fort Hood, Texas, which is where I was before I left. And not too long after I came back, my mom passed away. And so my ex-wife, and we were good friends. It was a very amicable divorce. I mean, it wasn't, it was like we pretty much both knew it was coming. And so my ex-wife and my two sons were still living here in the Fort Hood area. My father was back in Marble Falls, again, about an hour away, not in very good health. And so I was looking at, man, I probably shouldn't think about getting out of the Army, even though I only had 4 years to go to retirement. I was at 16 years at the time. But I knew, since I had already been at Fort Hood for a while, there was no way that I was going to stay there for the remainder 4 years of my career. And that meant leaving my kids and leaving my dad, which were not options. Leaving my kids was not an option for me at that time. So back then, the Army used to have a program called ACAP. It's now called SFL TAP. And they're the guys that help you put your resume together and that kind of stuff. And so I was putting my resume together, and I was a supply guy, logistics. That's what I did, which really kind of translates into Walmart distribution center in the real world. Nothing real fancy, nothing high paying, that's for sure. And out of frustration, one day I had this little Asian counselor that was helping me out. Her name was, or I'm sorry, Hispanic. Her name was Dana Garza. And she asked me one day, she says, Norm, if you could just pick anything, any career field, take the lid off the box, what would you want to do? I said, well, that's an interesting question. And because, we're kind of programmed to do what we've always done. And I said, well, Dana, quite frankly, I've always been interested in the financial services industry. And she said, well, why didn't you tell me that like a month ago when we started this whole resume process? I said, Dana, I don't have a degree in that. I don't have any experience in that. And thank God, she sent me to an interview with a company that she says, this is one of the best companies out there in the industry. If they hire you, they will give you all the training and help you get your licenses and all that. And I was like, well, awesome.
So before we continue with the transition, talking about your time in the Army, you mentioned that you really excelled in the Army. What helped you? What was it about the environment in the Army that you found conducive to excelling, and how did you excel in that environment?
That's an easy answer. And I know this is going to sound super cocky, but I don't mean it to be, but it's leadership. That's one thing and some people skills. One thing I've discovered is a lot of people they're scared to death to make a decision. They just go with the flow. They don't want to buck the system, so to speak. They don't want to stand out from the crowd. And I'm kind of the opposite of that. Every single place that I went, my immediate goal was, okay, how can I make this place better? What can I do to make this place better and excel? One of my pet peeves, I can't stand, well, we've always done it that way. Oh, that's like nails on a chalkboard to me when people say that. Well, we've always done it that way. And that won't work. How do you know? You've never tried. Even in Korea, people say, well, you're only going to be here for less than a year before you go back. What kind of difference can you make? Man, you can make a big difference in a year. Huge. So I always try to look at things like, how do I make improvements? How do I stand out? And then number two was, for me, it was always about my soldiers and taking care of them. One thing I've always understood is this people are your number one asset. And it doesn't matter what kind of organization you're in, what kind of industry you're in, whether it's a company or something. People are the number one asset of every organization in the world. And if you treat your people right, you're going to excel. You know, I'm a big, call it what you will, I'm a huge believer in what goes around comes around. You know, in the Bible, it says you reap what you sow. You know, you get what you put out there, however you want to word it, you know. And I've seen that my entire life, that you get what you put out there. And so I think that's what helped a lot. And then just, you know, obviously having a good work ethic and not just wanting to coast, you know. And again, which goes back to just wanting to make a difference.
So I think, and it's interesting because, like I said, I was at my daughter's career day, and so these are high school students, and their perception of the military is it's very sort of hidebound. You know, that thing. Oh, we this is the way it's always done. That kind of thing. Where did your desire to to improve things, to, if necessary, kind of break the mold, where do you think that came from?
Probably my dad. Honestly, my dad was retired military. Well, he was also logistics. In fact, he was a quartermaster instructor at Fort Lee when I was a child. So I spent a lot of time at Fort Lee in Virginia. And he always taught me work smarter, work not harder. You know, he always taught me growing up, try to work with your brain, not your back, so to speak. Although I did a lot of back-breaking work, don't get me wrong. And everybody in the military has, pretty much. I don't care what you do. But he just taught me that work ethic. I mean, I had my first job at like 11 or 12 years old, worked all the way through high school. So my dad instilled that work ethic in me. And he said, always look at things from the angle of do it right the first time, so you don't have to redo it. And then not just do it right, but try to make it where somebody else has to come along you and do something later, make it easier for them. In other words, don't just do it, but teach it to other people so that it's easy for everybody. The old it's a cliche, but many hands make light work. So in the Army, there's two kinds of leaders. There's the ones that say, all right, go get it done. And then there's the ones that say, okay, let's get it done. I like to think I was the second one 99% of the time. I didn't watch my guys do something. I was right there with them.
You said you were an E7 master sergeant, is that it? Or
first sergeant? Well, actually it's a sergeant first class, but I actually served as a first sergeant a couple of times.
Okay. And so I'm guessing similar to the Navy, you had responsibility for training the junior enlisted people, but I suspect also the junior officers who were coming in, generally speaking, pretty green. They have a college degree probably, right? And they got their shiny, we call them in the Navy butter bar, right? That for second lieutenant's bar, right? But they don't know a whole lot about leadership or command or anything. So what was it like to be in that sort of middle position where, in essence, you were training the people junior to you, but in some ways also training the people senior to you as well?
That's probably one of the things I enjoyed most about the military was teaching and training other folks. Seeing that moment in somebody else, that when that light bulb actually goes off and they get it, and they got it, to me was always extremely rewarding. But as far as butter bars go, I had some interesting experiences with some. Some were phenomenal. Some of them needed a lot of work, like you said, to put it mildly. But what I always try to do is just like, look, I'm gonna set you up for success. Obviously technically you outrank me, but at the same time, you don't know your left from a right. So if you'll allow me to help you, then we'll do some great things together. And thank goodness, almost every single one that I ever worked with was very receptive to that idea. And I even probably the only one that wasn't. I worked really closely with for a little bit with a West Point graduate, and I thought, I don't know how you got out of West Point, man. Probably one of those guys. This particular guy was super. I mean, he was a great person, probably one of the most smartest book smart people I ever knew. Didn't have the common sense of a rock, you know. But at the same time, he was pretty coachable. He kind of got it after a while. He's like, okay, I get it. You know, you go do your thing, I'll do my thing. We'll meet at the end of the week and see how it went. And it ended up being pretty good. But they definitely have a learning curve. You're right, and it's really
Yeah. Yeah, I told the high school kids a story about when my dad, got out of officer training and he reported to his first ship, a brand spanking new ensign, and there's this crusty old Navy chief petty officer in this, in the workspaces, and my dad was an anti-submarine warfare officer, and my dad shows up, and the chief looks at him, he says, Mr. Bemmel, yes? My dad says, yes, chief, and he says, all right, Mr. Bemmel, you have a fundamental decision to make right now. You can let me run this division and teach you what you need to know in order to be its leader, or you can do it by yourself. My dad says, Chief, I choose option number one. And my dad would tell me, that's the best decision I ever made, as a Navy officer, because this chief, look, he was one of these guys, he'd been through World War II, and he really knew what was what, and to have that kind of experience in someone who's training you is beyond invaluable. So, well, so okay, so now you're going through your transition out, and you're talking to your transition officer who's getting you into financial services. So how did that transition go? Because although this isn't a show only for military people, even for non-military people, I find making a career transition can be very difficult. Oftentimes we're faced with kind of cultural issues because we're used to life working a particular way, and now we're in this other industry or whatever, and it works completely different. So what was that experience like for you?
It was really interesting, and I have fond memories of the whole process, really, because when Dana gave me that card for this one particular company, I gave him a call, told him who I was. They set up an interview, and I went for an interview. And for what I thought would be probably a 30-minute interview, ended up actually being almost 3 hours, because
Wow.
the guy, we got to talking, and a lot of stuff that he was teaching me about the financial world was significantly different than what I had been taught by my financial agent of a different company that I was actually a client of previous to that for years. And so everything was going really well with this interview. And then the gentleman said, okay, we take care of your school and all that kind of stuff. But there is a $199 fee to get started. And for some reason, I guess because I had no frame of reference, all the little whistles and bells in my head started going off like scam, rip off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not paying you $200 to get a job, so to speak, kind of thing. And, but other than that, everything was really well. In fact, the guy that interviewed me was a retired Apache helicopter pilot for the Army. Super nice guy.
Wow.
And he owned a local office, and we shook hands, and I went. And I went out to my car, and I called my agent of the other financial company that I was a client of, and his name was Lee. I said, "Hey Lee, tell me about this particular company over here." And he's like, "Oh man, you don't want to go work over there. Those guys don't know anything about," just kind of badmouth them really negatively, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Whew, man, I'm really glad I called you. I could have made a mistake." He goes, "Well, what were you doing over there anyway?" I said, "Well, I'm getting out of the military, and I was, sent over there by my ACAP counselor for an interview." He's like, "Man, you need to come work with us." I was like, "Oh, I never thought about that, working with the company that I was already a client of, right?" And I said, "There's a novel idea." So went over and saw him, and he set up this thing, and I had to take this test, Kevin. It was about a 2.5 hour test, like 500 and something questions,
Oh.
personality aptitude kind of test. And at the end of it, a person comes out in one of two categories, and you either come out as a hunter, which is kill, sell, close, get the money, get Grant Cardone kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or on the flip side, you come out as a farmer, which is touchy-feely relationships, tend the garden, pick the weeds, take care of stuff, very people oriented, all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I came out as a farmer. They were looking for hunters, right? So he's like, well, don't give up yet. Sometimes we make an exception. You've been a good guy, blah, 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 leadership, all that kind of crap, right? So I was like, okay. And so he set me up with to go to a little group meeting that some guys from their corporate office in the Fort Worth area were going to come down to Central Texas. And this was all going on, kind of a whole like a month and a half process. So I set that up. And then as I'm continuing to get out of the military, one of the things that they make you do is a psych eval. So I had to, check that box that you're not a psycho. So I went and got a 60-minute evaluation from a local psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever. I don't remember what it was. But during that little interview with that guy, he said, well, so what are you looking at doing when you get out of the Army? And I said, well, right now I'm actually kind of looking at financial services, but it's not going real well so far. And he says, man, that's weird. We just had a guy in here yesterday that's looking for people. And he gave me a card. And that card was a company it was at the time, it was called RBR Investment Advisors. And so I called them, set up an appointment. My wife and I go over and visit with them. They're, about 40 miles away from where we're at. I go into this building and it's just like on TV, man. There's this electronic ticker thing going around the room, with all the NASDAQ symbols and stuff on it. And 4 or 5 guys sitting there on the phones and cubicles and talking to people. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of neat. Right. And so the main guy greets us, takes us into a conference room, and he gives me one sheet of paper, and he goes, okay, here's what I need you to do. I need you to study this sheet of paper for 5 minutes, pick up the phone, dial the number on the bottom of the paper, and sell me $10,000 worth of stock in that company. Well, that company happened to be TXU Electric. So he left the room. So my wife and I are sitting there, and she's like she doesn't even know what to do, right? So I'm like, oh, I got 5 minutes, man. So I'm studying all this and making some bullet points. And 5 minutes later, I call that number, do the best that I can to fundamentally pitch this guy and try to get him to buy $10,000 of TXU stock. And had the conversation, hung up. He opens the door. I did not know he had me on speaker out there where all those other people are listening to me, and they're all like clapping and stuff, right? He's like, man, wow, that was really good. And I'm like, okay, if you say so. And he goes, yeah, we would definitely love to have you working with us. And he goes, and so here's our system. And he gave me this big old thick book, Kevin. He goes, okay, you'll get your insurance license first, and then we'll get your Series 7 license. And just read this book, study it, take the test. Once you take the test, let me know. The first 50 clients that we develop, those are going to be mine for training you. I got nothing off the first 50 clients. He said from 51 to 100, we're going to split those. And then 101 on, they're all yours. Okay. I didn't know any difference, right? I figured that was normal. I didn't have any difference, right?
Right, no reference.
So on the way home, and by the way, they were all cold calling, right, off of lists and stuff. And on the way home, my wife's like, I don't have a good feeling about that company. And one thing I learned about Teresa is she's got a sixth sense that's ridiculous. And I said, yeah, I'm not really sure about that either. The guy seemed way too salesy for me. Remember, I'm the farmer. That was more hunter position. And so I'm looking at the other company. They set me up with the thing. I go in there, and I didn't like that either. And so, kind of a long story short, a little bit, I'm sitting on a front porch swing at my dad's house down in Marble Falls, and we're just kind of talking. And I'm sharing, man, Dad, I don't really know what I want to do, and da 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 da. And here's my dad. He's like, well, let's just review the one company. Oh, and by the way, the second company that I was actually a client of, they had over $5,000 of monthly expenses that you were responsible for from day one, because they had the whole floor of this office building, and they all share alike in the rent. They share alike in the secretary and the printer and all the expenses. So you had about $5,000 per month of expenses immediately. Well, my dad said, I don't like the sound of that. And I said, yeah, that's kind of crazy. And plus you had to have like this $5,000 wardrobe, because they all wore suits and ties, which I owned like 2 suits, right? Class A's didn't count. And then he says, so the other company, the 100 people, he goes, I definitely don't like the idea of that. And I said, yeah, Teresa didn't like them either. And he says, so the first company you went to, the one that the counselor told you to go to, you said they're going to pay for your school and all and your license and everything, right? Yeah. He goes, well, what was the problem there? Did you like the guy and everything? You get a good feeling? I had a great feeling, great guy. I said, but it was $200 to get started. Okay, the other company's $5,000 to get started. Basically, the other company is 100 clients. And Kevin, I hope nobody takes offense to this, but as only a dad can say, he says, "Look, dumbass, pretty obvious to me where you need to go." And then again, it was a God moment. My dad goes, "Look, you need to go with that company. If it doesn't work out, I'll give you back the $200." Now, it wasn't the $200. You get that? I had money. It was just the concept.
Right.
I was like, yeah, you're right. Okay. So I called him, got started the next day, got my own franchise in less than a year and a half. Been here now. I'm in my 23rd year. The one company with 100 clients, they don't even exist anymore. The other company that was looking for hunters, they've had so many lawsuits from the military and soldiers and stuff, because that's what they do, is they specialize in tattooing and screwing soldiers and veterans. They've had lawsuits galore, and our company just came out as one of the most trusted companies in North America again. So it was a whole God thing, man. I look back and go, God was all over that. I just really wasn't listening, but he kept putting people in my path to here, listen to me, man. So it was amazing.
The way I describe it is, God will tap us on the shoulder, and we're so busy, running our lives, we brush him off. So then finally he's got to like this, and then we're still brushing him off, and finally he's got to really sock us in the face, and then we go, oh gosh, I guess I should be listening. So talk, if you would, for a few minutes. Why financial services? What did you find interesting about financial services?
Well, when again, that goes back to when Dana asked me, she goes, well, what is it? She asked me that same question. I said, look, Dana, it's pretty simple. From what I know, they make a lot of money and they work indoors. That was it. That was my whole motivation. And plus, having been a client, it was pretty interesting. I remember vividly back when I was stationed in Germany, I was an E5 supply sergeant for an MI company. And I had been doing the things that I had been taught. I had money in a CD, because it had a better interest rate than savings account, and kind of, what I had been taught. And my lieutenant and our company XO were outside of my supply room, and I heard them talking, and they were basically bragging to each other. And I overheard they were talking about these insane rates of return on their, my mutual fund got 20-something%. Well, mine did 28 and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I step out there and go, LT, what the heck's a mutual fund? And they look at me like, Sarge, come here, Sarge. And they sat me down between the two of them and gave me a little mutual fund 101. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know they existed. And this was in 1992, 93, somewhere. Yeah, 92. And boy, I came back, you couldn't buy anything over there. But as soon as I got back to the United States in 93, 94, I bought 5 mutual funds I picked them out of Money Magazine. It was like T. Rowe Price and Vanguard and something with it. Janus Fund. Janus was a company. Like 5 mutual funds. Probably the worst 5 mutual funds in the history of the world, because I had no idea what I was doing. Right? But I know they work. So if you know how to pick them. So my first experience was not good. But I learned, like, okay, it's like a car. Sometimes you get a lemon if you don't know what you're looking for, right?
Yeah. I mean, I used to tell people when I started my first business, I think I lost, more money than I made the first year or two, and I'd blow a deal that should have made me whatever, $20,000, $30,000. And I'd say, okay, well, that was a semester at the Wharton School or something, because in many ways that real life experience I thought was more valuable than, sitting in a classroom, even one of the top business school classrooms, based on what I wanted to do. So, we make these mistakes, but they turn, I think, to be very valuable, down the road, even if they're costly. So, talk about, if you would, what you do in financial services. So what is kind of, a typical day and, in the life of, Norm Mitchell, as he, works on his business, as he deals with his clients, customers. What is, well, actually, I'm sorry, before you get there, would you talk for a few minutes? They put you through a training program. So what was the training like for all of that? What kind of training did you have to do?
Well, initially, the first license that everybody gets in our industry pretty much is an insurance license. And so we had, and I was still in uniform. I was still actually active duty. I had actually started part-time until I got my ETS date came up and I was able to get out and never miss a beat. But we had a class, Friday night, 6 to 10, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. The following weekend, again, Friday night. So it was a 40-hour class, 2 weekends in a row. You go take your state exam, pass that, immediately started studying for the investment license, took what they call the 6 and 63 for your investments, took those two back to back on the same day, which you could do back then, and they don't let you do that nowadays, but I did that. So I had every license out there within 90 days of getting started. And my whole goal, quite frankly, as an E7 back in 2000, my income was 40 grand a year. That's what an E7 made back then, 23 years ago. Mm-hmm. My entire goal, Kevin, was if I can make 40,000 a year and pretty much set my own hours, see my kids, go to sleep in my bed every night, I'm a happy dude. I mean, that would be a dream come true for me, mm-hmm. To replace my income and not have to leave my kids and go overseas for a year and stuff like that. Man, I'd be a happy dude. And mm-hmm. Of course, like anything else, every business takes off a little slow. The first few months I was averaging between $1,500 to $2,000 a month, $2,500 a month. Kind of panicking because, like I said, I had gone through the divorce, so I had child support, mortgage, I still had the bills. Just because you got out of the Army doesn't mean the bills stop. And I was like, okay, this needs to go a little faster. And but I kept on going, had a conversation with my trainer several times about, man, is this going to work? Is this going to work? He says, you're doing all the right things. Just keep doing it. And in my 9th month, I made 11 grand in 1 month. And I thought, wow. Yeah, wow. That was like, dude, this is awesome. Wow. And I thought, okay, this works. This is cool. But there's a concept. Well, it's not a it's the way the whole financial world works. It's called profit sharing. Well, it's like real estate. If you're the broker of a Keller Williams or a Century 21 office, you're the guy that owns it, and your agent goes out there and sells a house. Well, the commission on the sale of that house is split 50-50. The agent gets 50, it's a 6% commission, but the agent gets 3%, the broker gets 3%. Well, financial services is kind of the same way. So at the end of the day, the more money I was making, the more money the guy that owned the office that I was working out of, the more money he made. And I didn't care because he was bending over backwards to help me make money. It didn't come from my money. The company paid him, but I had no expenses. See, he had to pay the rent. He had to pay the electric bill, the water bill, the phone bill, the internet service. He paid all the overhead. I didn't pay anything. Mm. I thought, well, that's a pretty fair deal, as long as it don't come from my money. A lot of money, right?
Absolutely.
I got curious. That month that I made $11,000, I said, okay, Jerry. It was his, I said, what was your profit sharing off of what I did? $8,000. I said, so I made 11 and you made 8 and you didn't do anything. I want your job. And I said, how do I get to where you're at? Right. And he said, all you got to do is hire and train people. Now think about it. If you're the broker owner of a Century 21 office, what's your only job? Hire and train real estate agents.
Hmm.
Well, in the financial world, if you want to have your own agency, your own practice, your only job is to hire and train not real estate agents, but financial agents, financial advisors.
Hmm.
So I said, well, how many is it? What's a good number to get to where you're at fairly quickly? And he said three. He said, you need to hire 3 people every month, teach them the business, and within 6 months, you'll have your own agency.
Hmm.
I did.
Okay.
And I did. He was
Wow.
exactly right. So I started training people about, what I knew. And,
Mhm.
of course, not everybody stuck, because some people are not farmers, they're hunters, and hunters need to go sell used cars instead of dealing with people, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and but it worked out just like that. And so I got my own office, and man, it's been amazing. So originally, to answer your question, I know it's a long answer. I started
Yeah.
off just really focusing on the customers and the clients and doing a great job for them, and being that the best, basically the best financial advisor I could be. And then
Mhm.
decided, hey, I want more out of this because there's more available. If you're going to do something, why not go for it, right? And so then
Mhm.
I just kind of switched a little bit into the training, leadership, mentorship, hiring, and training role, which is where I'm at now. And
Mhm.
here we are, 23 years later. We have licensed agents in 29 different states, where we started on
Wow.
in just, Killeen, Texas, right by Fort Hood, in a just there was just me. Now we've got hundreds of people, like I said, in 29 states. So it's been a wild ride, man. It's been phenomenal. We're so blessed. My wife and I, so blessed.
Mhm. So, um, how long into your financial services career did you? I mean, it's almost like you went from being kind of a private or a PFC to being that that first sergeant again, right? Because as a first sergeant now you're taking care of all your people as opposed to having primary responsibility for for getting the work done, so to speak. So how long did that leap take for you to get to that kind of next level?
Year and a half.
Year and a half,
Yeah.
18
So
months.
yeah, in our company, it's a 2-month qualification period to get your own franchise. And so
Mhm.
in my 17th and 18th month, I met the qualifications, got my franchise, been an owner ever since.
Mhm. And you say you have a couple hundred agents now, is that it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And we have about 210, with about 141 that actually have a license, and then the
Mhm.
others are in the licensing process in
Okay.
29 different states.
So talk now about what is your, as the person who runs a financial services agency, what do you typically do these days? As you go through, your average day.
My average day is mostly conducting interviews for folks that are interested in this career, making determinations whether I feel like they're going to be a good fit. And I'll just tell you that I work almost exclusively with veterans,
Mhm.
not just because I am one, because I understand where they're from. I appreciate veterans and first responders probably more than anybody else. Again, not only is my dad retired, my father-in-law from my first marriage was retired military. My current father-in-law, my wife and I have been married almost 23 years now. I actually got out of the Army, got remarried, and started this business in the same month. And
Wow.
so my current father-in-law is retired. He's a Vietnam vet, Purple Heart. So it's just I'm very passionate about helping people that are veterans, active duty, and not just because of what they've done, but I look at the fact that I was given this chance, and I want to give it to other people. So many people that I meet, and Kevin, to me, it's so sad that somebody out of the military says, well, I'm a truck driver. That's all I know how to do. Well, I could have said, I'm a supply person. I'm a logistics person. That's all I know how to do. And as I said at the top, I'd probably be stuck in some mediocre existence at the Walmart distribution center, or God forbid, a government contractor that's constantly worried about losing a contract. And I would never have the financial independence, never have the freedom, never have had the life. But again, praise God, when my counselor gave me this card and said, they will train you. Hey, I can learn something new. If you teach me and train me, I can learn something new. And so I always tell veterans, man, I prefer people that have no success. I don't no experience. I don't care what your background was in the military. I don't care if you were Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, Coast Guard. I don't care. Can you learn something new? Do you want to control your own life? And most importantly, do you have a heart to help other people and make a difference in their life? That's the person I'm looking for. So on a daily basis, I'm looking for that person. And then if I find that person, then I spend the time teaching them, training them, mentoring them, along with the rest of our business on a weekly basis. And empowering my leaders. So I'm a big fan of John Maxwell. I'm sure you're familiar with John Maxwell. You know, one of the things he does is talks about, you got to empower your leaders. You know, so I spend time, I have a breakfast every Friday morning with my leaders that are local that can make it. And we just, you know, I share a lot of stuff with them. I give them the opportunity to ask me anything about anything. And, you know, so I'm trying to empower my leaders to become franchise owners of their own. And I mean, if you own one McDonald's, do you want to have just one, or do you want 20 or 30 of them? You know, so I'm trying to give other people the same shot, the same opportunity that I was given. That's what my life is about right now.
So, and you mentioned, you know, some of these, I think, just a moment ago, but what are the qualities that you think make a successful financial services agent or financial advisor? I mean, because people hear that, I think, well, gosh, I probably have to be really good at math, or I got to be really good at sales, you know, those kind of things. How do you see some of those issues? And you know, if a person is sort of self-evaluating, what questions would you encourage them to ask themselves?
Oh, that's a great question, Kevin. So first of all, I can't stand salespeople. I won't hire a salesperson. I'm not in sales, and being in the financial world, it's not a sales position. Salespeople will not make it here. Okay, for various reasons. Okay, the number one, and I think this is probably true for, hopefully, for all businesses. To me, the number one most important character trait that a person has to have is integrity, bar none. I mean, if people can't trust you, they're not going to do business with you ever. You know, they've got to trust you, and you've got to be, and you got to earn that trust. You know, and once that trust is gone, it's not coming back. So you got to have integrity, and I mean a high degree of integrity, doing the right, have character, you know. And then number two is you got to be friendly. You know, you got to be you've probably heard the old cliche, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You know, you got to be friendly. People get enough negative. The world's full of negativity. People want to be around people that are positive, that are motivated, that are friendly. You know, one of the best things that I was taught years and years ago was, whenever you come into another person's existence, like if I come into your presence and then I leave your presence, you should feel better for me having been there. If you and I are engaging and then I walk away and you feel worse for me having been in your presence, that's not a good thing. You know, so just integrity, being friendly. And then one thing I like to brag on my personal business that I teach constantly is, we call it outrageous customer service. Every one of my clients, every one of my advisors, everybody gets my cell phone number. I don't want them calling an 800 number and sitting on hold after pushing 15 buttons, and, you know, push 1 for Spanish and 2 for English and all that. Nuh-uh. You get my cell phone number, right? That never happens in the financial world. A lot of companies won't even work with people unless they have 250,000, 300, 400, $500,000 to invest. I'll work with any, you got $50 a month, you want to put it in a Roth IRA, or you've got $50 a month, you want to open up a kid's college fund, call me. I'm happy to do that. Because not everybody, you know, I like working with normal people. Merrill Lynch can go have the 1%. I don't care. I want to work with real people, veterans, teachers, nurses, first responders, the people that make a difference in other people's lives. You know, so just being friendly. Salespeople that want to just sell. Here's the other thing I was taught early on too, that the minute a person sees dollar signs in your eyeballs, it's over. You know, so you got to want to just do the right thing and think. I always teach my guys, you got to think long term. You know, being in a military town, especially one like Fort Hood, which is the largest military base of anything in the whole world, and you know this as well as a veteran, the military community is very small. You know, yeah, there's over 1 million of us, but it's a small community. So if I got somebody who's stationed at, let's say, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and he's in the Army, and that person's got orders to come to Fort Hood, you don't think he's going to ask a bunch of people at Fort Bragg, hey, who do I need to go see? Who do I need to stay away from at Fort Hood? Oh, stay away from so-so and so-and-so, right? Well, that never happens with us because we do the right thing. We take care of people so that when somebody does come here, that, oh yeah, you need to go see, you know, Norm Mitchell and the Mitchell Group, that kind of thing, right? And vice versa. It's a small community. So you got to focus constantly on just doing the right thing. Don't worry about sales. It's not sales. I mean, if I can save you $60 a month on your car insurance, that's not sales. I'm helping you save money. You know, everything we do has to be better for our customers or they don't become our customers. You know, you're not going to pay me more for car insurance.
Hopefully not, right? So what would you say to, let's say, you know, you got kind of here's a good example. So when I was with the submarine squadron down in Point Loma, so we had these young guys, you know, they come out of nuclear school, the Navy just spent $1 million, you know, training them, right? And they got a signing bonus, sometimes as much as $50,000. And the next thing you know, they're driving up in a, you know, S-Class Mercedes, and, you know, they're just like, they've like piled it on, right? And these, you know, I get these sailors coming to my office as a chaplain, and they're like, chaplain, I don't know what to do. I said, what's up, shipmate? They're like, I can't afford my insurance. I can't keep up my car, you know. I mean, they don't have $50, you know, to buy food that week. What do you tell, you know, someone who's in that situation, you know, who really is in pretty dire straits, self-imposed probably, but still, you know, they were young, maybe foolish, okay, but we probably all were young and foolish to a certain extent, right? So what do you tell someone like that?
Well, the first thing we got to do is put a plan together, a plan of action. I mean, in that scenario that you just described, the number one overarching thing has to be debt elimination. You know, and in that process, identifying, okay, who is your car insurance with, for example? Let's see if we can save you some money. If we save you $40, $50, $60, we're going to put that towards your debt. You know, who is your life insurance with? Can we save you some money there? So we're going to try to find ways to save them money in everything that they're doing. Okay. What are you spending money on that you don't need? Like, you don't need those $3,000 rims on the $600 car. You know, there's a couple of places. Hey, seriously, man, you've seen it. There's a couple of places here in Killeen. I don't understand it, but it's called Rent a Tire. What do you mean rent a tire? Okay, I don't get it, but so, you know, you got to look at what can we get rid of, and then, hey, let's tackle that debt. Let's get you debt free, and get them on a plan to get them that way as fast as possible without destroying their credit score, which they've probably already done. You know, and then once we get them out of debt, now we can work with them to start an emergency fund, get that funded. So an emergency fund will keep them out of debt, hopefully from going back in it. And then we can start some midterm accounts and some long-term retirement accounts. but it's hard to save for retirement when you're worried about the light bill being, paid or not, right?
Right,
So
absolutely.
getting people out of debt and just figuring out ways to save money and eliminate waste would be step number one, of course.
Absolutely. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to open it up here. There's about, I think, 9 or 10 of your colleagues here in the meeting with us. Do you folks have any questions you want to ask Norm that maybe you've been dying to ask him and didn't want to put him on the spot? You can do that now because, right, this isn't his room. This is mine. So, or if there's just something you think would that he hasn't covered that you think people would be interested in knowing about. We got any takers there? Just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. We'll see if anybody chimes in. Oh, everybody's quiet. All right. Well, while you think about that, I'm gonna ask you another question. You mentioned that you got married, left the Army, and got into financial services all at the same time. So how has being in financial services, struggling to start that business in the beginning, how did that impact your marriage? Because especially, newly married, that can be a very, tough time in a relationship. So kind of taking this into a little more personal, if that's okay, how did that impact your marriage?
Great question, Kevin. And my wife will tell you, had I been her first husband, who was a train wreck, she would have said, "No way, dude." But we had already been dating and kind of together for about 8 months before we did get married. And she brought a wonderful stepson into my life who was about the same age as my youngest son. So it was a blended family of 3 boys. That was fun. But she knew my work ethic, and she just had that confidence that I was going to do what I said I was going to do, which is one of the things that I preach like crazy to people, be a man of your word, do what you say you're going to do. But like I said, it was rough. The first probably 6 months, like any business, most businesses don't really turn a profit until 5 years. Thank God this one's a whole lot faster, because you learn, as I like to say, you learn as you earn, or you earn as you learn. I look, you're wearing glasses, so you've been to an eye doctor before. They got to go to school for 4, 6, 8, 10 years to become an optometrist. They don't make jack while they're going through school. And at the end of that school, they're in debt 6 figures in student loans. Okay. Well, I earned money as I was going. Let's say that the financial services world is a 2-year school before you get really good at it and start making some really good money. Well, I went to financial services school for 2 years. And within 2 years, I got my own franchise, making 6 figures, but made money along the way. That's a whole lot better program. But the first 6 months is the toughest. And again, I had a really good coach when I started. And there was a time, don't get me wrong, as I said, I had some conversations with him, is this going to work? Is this going to work? In fact, in all transparency, in probably the 3rd, 4th, 5th month area, I was actually looking at being a substitute teacher, just part-time to bring home a few extra $100 here and there, right? Because again, that child support and the mortgage and all that they're still knocking on your door, right? And but thank God it just worked out, and I never had to do that. But my coach, when I started, he told me this. He said, "Norm, you're going to get ridiculously underpaid your first 18 months for the amount of work that you put in. But the trade-off is you will get ridiculously overpaid for the work you put in the rest of your life." And he was spot on. He was spot on. I'll probably make over $30,000 this month and haven't put in 20 hours in a week in years.
Wow. That's almost as much in a month as you were hoping to make in a year when you started out.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it is. So I one last question for you. What would you say to that person who, they want to move their life forward, but You know, gosh, I mean, my life is a financial train wreck, and I don't know anything about financial services. Who am I to be, you know, advising other people on what they can do when, you know, I'm a complete washout when it comes to any of this stuff? What would you say to someone like that?
I would say, you know, the best people to help a drug addict is a recovering drug addict. The best people to help people financially are people that have been bankrupt and have a testimony of what not to do. You know, let me help you learn from my mistakes. You know, so like I said, it doesn't matter if you've had a bankruptcy or if, you know, I had $74,000 of credit card debt when I started in this business, all on plastic, Kevin. And I keep all of those 12 credit cards. They're in my desk drawer right now, wrapped up in a rubber band as a reminder of where I came from. 74,000. I was a smart E7. I mean, I was not, you know, I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, but I'm not the dimmest either, right? But here I was in E7, $74,000 in credit card debt.
Wow.
So, hey, people who've been, you can't have a testimony if you haven't been put through a test. So people that are financially horrible make really good testimonies and really have that heart to help people avoid what they've gone through. I think they're wonderful candidates.
Well, and I think that that's a good note to end our talk on. We could continue for a long time. I find that's always the case. We've really in some ways just scratched the surface, but our hour is almost up here. So Norm, first of all, thank you very much for coming and talking with us today. I think people are going to find this enormously valuable, and as is so often the case with the people that I'm fortunate enough to interview on my show, really an inspirational story. I mean, this is sort of the classic, you know, American story, right? Kind of rags to riches in essence, maybe not literally, but you know, someone who has really exceeded far beyond their wildest dreams. And I think, and tell me if you disagree with this, but it seems to me that while you're financially successful, the success that you value most is all of the people that whose lives you've been able to positively impact over both your time in the Army as well as in financial services. It strikes me that if you were to list, you know, the top 4 things that you think make you a success, money is probably not going to be at the top.
No, it's making a difference. It's all about making a difference.
Great.
And
well, so
it's all about
go
making
ahead.
a difference. Now, my grandkids have thousands of dollars in their mutual funds because grandpa set it up for them when they were babies. So I want to make a generational difference, but not just in my family, in other people's as well.
Excellent. Well, Norm, again, thank you very much for joining me. So I just want to mention next week on every Tuesday now, I do a second show. It's called Business Lessons from the Military. And we are talking about business lessons that we can learn from Marine Corps warfighting doctrine. So I think you will be surprised to find out how much the sort of existential nature of war translates into business without the kind of danger that you know, you get into when you're doing house-to-house fights and that kind of thing. So I invite you to join me on Tuesdays, 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, and again, an hour in for Central and Mountain. That's a half-hour show. And then we will be back here again next Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And my guest next week is going to be Anna Rourke. Anna, it has a business called Gratitude and Food. And I think you will find Anna to be, I hope it's okay to still say this, enormously charming as well as quite brilliant in the business that she has built. I think in some ways on the same philosophy that Norm has built, where the basis of a business is is helping people, having a positive impact on people's lives. So all of you here in the meeting, thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching us on streaming, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week. And as I always do, I sign off by acknowledging a very important person in my life, someone who was very, very dear to me, and that is, of course, my dear friend Marie Darlin. You are and ever will be my bell. Thank you all very much, and look forward to seeing you next week. That was great.
Thanks,